When it comes to winterizing your swimming pool, the skimmer is one of the most likely areas to experience a problem and potentially a failure due to poor winterization. The process of winterizing your skimmer basically should look like the first step is you drain the water down in your pool. The height that you drain the water to is basically a minimum of 1 inch below the lowest return port, because you're going to have to blow out the suction line, which is going to be the skimmer line, but you also have to blow out the return line. So having that water level down below wherever that water returns to the pool is important. That's what's going to enable that. In that process, now your water is going to be below the skimmer mouth, so water can no longer fill up the skimmer. That's the first step of winterizing. The next step would be to go to your pump room, where that skimmer line ultimately connects to, and open up and winterize your pump. Now that you've got the system open, as a swimming pool technician, we have blowers specifically designed for the pool and spa industry. Basically, they're just a powerful blower, moves maybe 6 times as much air as something like a 5 or 6 horsepower wet dry shop vac or shop vacuum, something like that. They're a really powerful blower, and we just take that and we stick it right down into the suction line that connects to the pump. And what that does is that blows all of the water through the entire suction line all the way back to the skimmer. And when you hook up that blower and you turn it on, it takes about 3 to 5 seconds, and you can hear the blower ramping up, and then all of a sudden the water just erupts out of the top of the skimmer. So you remove the lid and you remove the basket from the skimmer, and that's where the water comes out. Now, you might think, well, how does that get all the water out, right? Like, you blow it out, but then there's a bunch of water still in there gurgling around. Basically, what you do is you just set that blower up on your skimmer and walk away. Walk away for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The amount of time it takes is going to depend on how powerful the blower is that you're using and the distance that the pipe run is from the pump all the way back to the pool. But just set that up and let that thing run and go work on something else, like removing the return eyeballs or sinking the lights in the pool or something like that. And just let that blower run until ultimately there is no more water coming out at all. Like, basically what you want to aim for is bone dry. It doesn't need to be 100% bone dry, but if you make that your goal, then you're sure to alleviate yourself of any potential problems in the springtime. And a problem with a skimmer could be a pretty costly problem for a lot of different reasons, so definitely something you want to avoid. But now we're at the point where we've drained the skimmer, we've blown out all the water, it's all dry in there, but now what? What do we do from here? So the next step is to identify what kind of configuration you have on the bottom ports of your skimmer. If your skimmer is super old, you maybe just have one pipe that comes up. That's it. So let's talk about that for a second. So one pipe that comes up into the bottom dead center of a skimmer. What you want to do with that is, the first thing is you want to feel, is it a threaded connection or is it a slip connection? So basically what you're hoping for is threads. Threads are what are going to enable you to use something called a gizmo. A gizmo looks like basically a big empty pop bottle, and it threads into place into that threaded connection on the bottom of most skimmers. And what that allows is, over the winter season, water is going to find its way back into your skimmer one way or another. Maybe the water level in your pool rises and overfills into the mouth and fills the skimmer, or it could be water leaking down through the top or snow melting and filling up the skimmer. But eventually you have to assume that skimmer is going to be full of water again. And during the spring, when you have freeze-thaw cycles, what can happen is that, end up all of that water in there, and it could just freeze and blow out the sidewalls of your skimmer, and that's what you're trying to avoid. Putting that gizmo in place, basically what it enables to have happen is, instead of the ice expanding outwards and breaking what is ultimately a very strong plastic product and potentially gravel or concrete around it, what it will do is instead crush inwards on that gizmo product. It's very much like a pop bottle, as I described. If you just had a pop bottle that was empty and you put a lid on tightly, you could squeeze it, you can compress it, and that will ultimately protect the skimmer. Where you can go wrong with the gizmos, if you have an older one that has a hole in it, just like a pop bottle with a hole in it. If you squeeze it, it's just going to fill back up with that water, and then you're going to lose the protection that you have there. So every year, check your gizmo, give it a shake. If it has water in it, it's garbage. Get a new one. You should be able to squeeze it, not hear any air escaping, anything like that, and that threads down into the bottom port. What if you don't have threads on the bottom? What do you do then? That's pretty common. Since we're talking about the style where you'd have a single port on the bottom, that is kind of an older style. If you have that, then it's most likely that you don't have those threaded connections on the bottom, thereby you can't use a gizmo. So what do? Well, the plug of choice is an expandable rubber plug, sized correctly. So let's say number 7, number 8, number 9, number 10. Those are the most common. Recently they came out with a 9 3/4 plug that's become common in the pool industry. That's really well sized for the type of equipment we use. It basically has a more aggressive shape to it so that you can fit it deeper into pipes but still get a really secure connection on the larger what would normally be like an 1.5 inch size port commonly seen in swimming pools. So get one of those winterization plugs, just rubber ones. They're cheap and available everywhere, and what you want to do is take some foam rope, which is exactly as it sounds. It's just a piece of foam. Sometimes it's called backing rod or other things like that, but foam rope, about 12 inches long, minimum about the thickness of your thumb, and you just sleeve that down into that pipe that is currently empty because you blew all of the water out of it, so there's nothing in there. You just sleeve that down in there, and in theory you can just put the plug in place now. Some people go the extra mile and want to use antifreeze, and there's nothing wrong with that. Do you need it 100%? No, absolutely not. If there is no air in that suction line, or sorry, if there's no water in that suction line, then no damage can occur from freezing. So in that sense, you don't need the antifreeze. But what happens if something like there's a crack in the pipe and it allows groundwater to bleed in over the winter and fill it up, and that makes the problem worse? Or what if that winterization plug in the bottom pops out and then a whole bunch of water gets in there during the winter when you can't really do anything about it? That's really where antifreeze is going to get you. It's going to help you in a secondary sense, kind of like a backup system to your winterization. So you don't need it, but you can use it, and it doesn't hurt anything, and it's not expensive, provided you don't use the wrong product. You need to use antifreeze that's compatible with swimming pools, and that's all I'm going to say on that. You can find it local to you wherever you are. Just make sure it's something that says compatible with swimming pools on it, because not all antifreeze is. So now that you've put some foam rope down in that hole, you went the extra mile and put in, let's say 1 to 2 cans of pop worth of antifreeze. That's a good size to use. Let's say like 750 milliliters, that is. You put that down inside the pipe, put the foam rope in, you put your rubber plug in. Now take about 2 more cans of pop, or another 750 milliliters, and pour it into the skimmer container itself. And what that's going to do is that water that we talked about that's going to end up getting in there over the winter season, you're going to have that diluted with some of this antifreeze, and it's going to reduce the likelihood of that causing a problem. And you're like, well, how could that cause a problem? We've done so much to protect it. What if the gizmo breaks this year? What if this is the year that it breaks? Well, maybe that antifreeze that you put in was just enough that water that added in there was diluted enough, and its freezing point was altered just enough that it didn't freeze and damage something during the freeze thaw. Again, that's the function of the antifreeze, is it's that backup line of protection. So that's pretty much it. We've covered blowing out the lines. We've covered attaching the gizmo in there. We've covered plugs that you can use if you don't have the threaded port connections, foam rope, antifreeze. Okay, so what if you have a different configuration? What if you have 2 ports on the bottom of your skimmer? Well, this changes things quite a bit. Now, where does that second port go? There's a couple of different configurations that you have. Assuming it's not just plugged off from the underside, like stick your finger down in there. Does it go down 2-3 inches and then it's just a dead stop? That's really common. So that is, if you have that, then see to the first example. Like, just imagine you only have one because you didn't need the second and it was deleted. That's most common in situations where there is no main drain, or there is a main drain, but it's been deleted. That's when you'd have that. If you have a main drain and it's still functional, then what you probably have is a situation where one pipe, the one on the back, goes all the way back to the pump room. The one on the front goes down and connects into the side port of the main drain for a non-pressurized equalizer line. The function of that line is to allow the skimmer to still get water if the water level in the pool drops below the mouth of the skimmer. Winterizing of that line, that particular line that we're talking about, the equalizer line, is the most challenging part of winterizing a pool skimmer, and that is the most common orientation. Most of you watching this video, this is the problem you're going to have. So we walk up to a pool that's been drained, nothing else. So take everything out of the skimmer. Now I see that there's 2 ports down there. I can feel them, that they're both open. So what I do is I put foam rope into the front port, about this much. It's kind of hard because it floats, but you jam it down in there and put the plug in place. Whether it's a threaded plug and you can use a gizmo, or it's a slip connection and you just put a rubber plug. Either way, now that's plugged out. Now I should be able to blow the water out of the skimmer. If I tried to do that without plugging that front port, that equalizer line is just going to let the skimmer keep refilling with water, and you'll never be able to evacuate it out of there. There is no way to eliminate that water from the equalizer line down to the main drain. That's why we didn't really do anything with it. Antifreeze will just exit the system by sinking to the bottom and escaping. So foam rope's pretty much your best option, because there's no other way other than swimming down and plugging it from the bottom with a duck plug and blowing it out, which is not something that anybody does with for winterizing their skimmer. So again, all you've done in this situation is you plug the front port with foam rope and a plug, and then you blew out the back port as normal, and then every other part of this is the same as the last time. The only thing that I will say now is, what if you just can't, you have no way to connect a gizmo? How do I protect my skimmer? Well, just plug off the ports as normal, but what you want to do is you want to get a pop bottle, not empty. Put, a small amount of water in it, and that will allow it to be neutrally buoyant. You don't want it to be floating on top of the water when the water in the skimmer freezes, thereby it gives you no protection. If it's somewhat neutrally buoyant in the water, then it'll float partially in the water, partially out, and when that skimmer freezes, it's going to crush the bottle and not break your skimmer. So I think that's pretty much everything. If you follow these steps when winterizing your skimmer, you're very likely to have no problems at all come the springtime.